Welcome to Books and Bridges, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization and a community institute of ideas and conversation. The mission of Books and Bridges is to bring people together through the best of human thought. We explore the wisdoms of the world and apply their meaning to modern life. What we will do tonight is listen to a presentation from Krishnan Venkatesh, professor at St. John's College. And this series that we are beginning is called Treasures of World Literature. And I also want to thank Utah Humanities for funding this event tonight. Actually, for the rest of the year, all of our events will be on Zoom because of the pandemic. And one thing I just wanted to say is that Books and Bridges aims to be a sort of third space in which we can step aside from our the normal environments of our everyday lives and join people in the pursuit of something more meaningful and something more universal. And in a society that is divided by uncivil discourse, the humanities provides beautiful and profound ideas to get us out of that rut. And so let me just introduce our panelists today formally. So Krishnan Venkatesh has taught at St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico for more than 30 years and helped shape its Eastern Classics graduate program. From 2003 to 2008, he was the Dean of the Graduate Studies at the college and is the author of a book on the Pali Canon of the Buddha and a forthcoming book on Tolkien. So he does know East and West very well. Born in Malaysia in 1960 to a South Indian Brahmin father and a Hakka Chinese mother, Venkatesh studied English literature at Magdalen College, Cambridge. He researched Shakespeare at the University of Munster, Germany. And from 1986 to 1989, he taught literature and philosophy at Shanxi University, China. The lifelong companions on his bedside table include Montaigne, Chaucer, Wordsworth, Zhuangzi, Dogen, Chekhov, Tolstoy, Balzac, and Shakespeare. And so tonight we will be talking about the book of Zhuangzi. And I just want to start by asking a question to our presenter. First, I just want to say that East and West have very different ways of imagining reality, imagining the world. So, Mr. Venkatesh, what is the book of Zhuangzi all about? How does it relate to other books you've read in the Chinese tradition, such as Confucius? So go ahead and talk, and we will listen to you.
Okay, thank you, Nathan, and thank you for the warm welcome. So I think first thing is first, and it's pronunciation. So you'll see in the write-up and in the quotes that I use it, the name is going to look like this, but you will also find that the name looks like this.
Lift it up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Zhuangzi. So both are different transliterations of the same sounds, and the transliteration I'm using tonight, it happens to be in the book that I have that I habitually use, and will be the transliteration that you see when we pull up quotations. But this is the older Wade Giles transliteration, which was used, invented around 1900, and then used in most of the Chinese translations that you will find in the bookstores. The other transliteration is the modern pinyin system, which is what they use in modern China these days. And most of the books of most Chinese books being published now in English are in pinyin. So it can get rather confusing which one you read, because they look very different. But don't be fazed by that, at least for tonight. So the name, how you pronounce it is Zhuangzi, right? Zhuangzi, right? And yeah, and this version Zhuangzi, not that ZH would ever be associated with J in English, but Zhuangzi. And one way to remember it is think about when you're trying to catch up with your Zhuangzi readings, think about keeping up with the Zhuangzis, right? That will stay in your mind. So Zhuangzi, now this this last thing, z, the z, the tzu there, and gets translated the zi there. They're both pronounced z, and so the name is Zhuang, and the z is an honorific. That means kind of master, and so you'll find, those of you who've read the Dao De Jing, you'll find that the author's name is Laozi, right? And so it just means master. It's not part of the name, but it's the honorific. If you read The Art of War, it's Sun Tzu, right? If you read the book of the Master Shun, it's Shunzi, and then you get Han Feizi. And so you ask, well, why are Confucius was Kungzi, Confuzi, and Mencius was Mengzi? And it became the Shis because the first translations were by Jesuits who tried to make it Latinized, right? So the Z is a very common honorific. So this is a little piece of trivia here that I think is pretty interesting. So Zhuangzi is the name. So who this guy was? So Zhuangzi wrote around the 4th century BC, and this means that he wrote after Confucius and after Laozi. Right? Both Confucius and Laozi appear as characters in Zhuangzi, and he pokes fun at them. But Laozi supposedly was his author mentor, his father figure. He read Laozi and underwent something of a conversion, or what the Greeks call a metanoia. You know, where your whole mind is turned around. So Laozi was someone he revered. And they both appear as characters in the book of Zhuangzi. And Laozi and Zhuangzi are commonly regarded as the founders of Daoism, right? Sometimes spelled Daoism in Pinyin, Taoism, Taoism in the older transliteration. So you'll hear the word Tao come out. Really, it's pronounced Dao. Right, like you see the Tao of Pu, right, and so it's pronounced Dao, so those are the two main sages of Daoism, and it's an ism connected with this thing called the Dao, which is very elusive and subtle and hard to understand. But I hope that by the end of this evening, you'll have some kind of purchase on what this Dao really is. Is it a religious thing? Is it like God? Maybe kind of like pantheistic God, perhaps, or is it some kind of principle or some idea of nature? Maybe those two. I guess we'll see. People argue about what this kind of thing is, and there's a religion of Daoism and there's a philosophy of Daoism. So you can talk about religious Daoism, you can talk about philosophical Daoism.
Can I ask one question? Is Dao at all related to the Greek idea of logos in any way?
Meaning it can be. It can be. Why do you ask?
Just because it seems like the Tao, doesn't that mean the path, and doesn't that imply some kind of order of nature, like the way that the world works, and logos implies something similar? Just wondering.
The way, yeah. I mean, it's commonly translated the way, but it really is like a path, right? You know, so not way as in method, but way as in path. And yeah, you know, actually it's interesting that you asked that, because the first translation of the Gospels into Chinese was done in the early 17th century by a Jesuit missionary called Matteo Ricci, who is a very, very interesting figure in his own right. And so the beginning of the Gospel of John goes, in the beginning was the Word. And so if you're interested in how that was translated, so in the Greek it would be in the beginning was Logos. Right? And arche ein ho logos. But then if you go to the Matteo Ricci's Chinese, and Ricci is kind of like stretching to find a word in Chinese that does logos, and so he says in the beginning was the Tao.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, so that's how the Gospel of John starts. So obviously it's possible to interpret it like that.
Yeah.
And you know, and one thing you'll find about Chinese is that they're not one religion people. So often you find a Chinese can be a Buddhist, a Taoist, and a Confucian all at once, and somehow it makes sense for that to hang together, right? No, in none of those systems of belief does anyone say you have to believe in this and only this, and you know, and in fact, in none of those is there a set of propositions that you have to adhere to. right? Because religion is more about a way of life, a way of seeing, not about propositions that you believe, right?
Nor
So
a ritualistic initiation as well.
yeah, they have ritualistic initiations too, but they have rituals, but they're not of the kind of absolute kind. You know, it's either this or that. It's not that kind. So and of course, you know, as we'll see, that both there are certain contradictions and tensions in Chinese culture. I personally don't think the West is one thing. I personally don't think the East is one thing, and I don't even think members of the same family believe in the same thing. You know, so it's you know, so I myself tend not to refer to East or West unless I get a very good reason. But even in Chinese, there are many traditions in China and many kind of internal philosophical struggles in Chinese. And one of them is that Confucianism places great emphasis on the family, and especially on the idea of filiality, on parent-child relationships. And Daoism tends to be it's a philosophy that frees itself from social constraints. So it's a kind of philosophy that anarchists like and hermits like. You know, so Thoreau would have loved this. Whitman would have loved this. You know, so Daoism is a philosophical viewpoint that attracts in a way wild, imaginative people, and you're going to see why in a minute. But often Confucians and Taoists are at odds. You know, Taoists find Confucians kind of too buttoned up, too straight-laced, constipated, always anxious, right? And Confucians see Taoists as kind of people who abandon society, abandon their responsibilities, they're anarchists, they're dangerous, and so on. So there's that kind of split in Chinese society that's very interesting, actually, and very fertile. So but back to Zhuangzi. So you have Zhuangzi and you have Laozi. So Laozi's Dao De Jing, many of you will know already. And the Dao De Jing is a small book, and it's a book of poems that are terse, ambiguous, such that sometimes when you have different translations, it's really hard to tell that it's the translation of the same thing, because the possibilities are many. But the poems are terse and they're difficult and pregnant and very austere. The vocabulary of the Dao De Jing isn't big. And I think the Dao De Jing may be one of the most translated books in English. There might be something like 100 translations of the Dao De Jing out there. And if you go to a bookstore, you will find maybe 10 translations of Dao De Jing in a Barnes and Noble. Half of them will be by people who know less Chinese than you do. But you will, but it's a book that has clearly moved people, right? And has got people to take it to heart. But it's a very austere book. It's kind of simple, but it's austere and powerful. Zhuangzi is the opposite. The book of Zhuangzi is, so where Dao De Jing, all the poems in the Dao De Jing could fit on 10 pages, right? If you didn't leave spaces, and it fit in 10 pages. Zhuangzi writes in prose, and the whole book of Zhuangzi, so it's just called the Zhuangzi or the book of Zhuangzi, and the whole book is about 300 pages, and so it's more expansive. On the other hand, it's as subtle, and maybe more subtle, and the reason is that Zhuangzi is a writer. Anyone who's a writer who reads Zhuangzi would recognize that this guy is a writer. He's a conscious stylist. There's a wide range of different styles. He can go from parody. He can go to wild spiritual rhapsodies. He can tell a story. He can tell jokes. The book is full of stories, dialogues, parables, jokes, and they're kind of loosely clumped together in chapters. And some chapters are very coherent, and other chapters you have to work to find how they connect these stories. So people like Zhuangzi, that you try to think about how many philosophers. I'm going to take a kind of philosophical and literary approach this evening, and and the hope is that when you're in lockdown, you're going to have one more book to amuse yourself with. And if this catches fire, I think you'll find that Zhuangzi is a good bedside companion. He's fun. When you think about how many philosophers are fun to read, there's Plato, there's Nietzsche, and there's Zhuangzi, and that's about it, right? So so he's very addictive. So I'm going to talk through several stories in Zhuangzi so that you can get the feel of him. And if everything that I say about the stories turns out to be worthless at the end of the night, then at least you'll have a bunch more stories to tell people. Nathan, could you put up the, yeah. Nathan, any more questions about the general background before we pull up a story?
So were you saying that the Zhuangzi is as a kind of reaction, not only to Confucianism, but to Laozi as well? Is that true?
Maybe. It may be. I mean, you get the impression he's a very free form of Laozi. He's much more freestyle, right? And inventive, creative. So I'm not myself sure that they're saying the same thing and that they can be lumped together as one school. I don't think they're a school, but it's more like a way of thinking, a way of approaching life. But there's significant differences between them. And it might be that Zhuangzi is kind of consciously differentiating himself from Laozi in doing this, you know. But it'll take a few more years before I understand like what's going on between the two.
I don't have any other questions. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, could you pull up number 1?
Right here.
It worked. Okay, so to get a flavor of the book begins like this. In the northern darkness, there is a fish, and his name is Kun. The Kun is so huge, I don't know how many thousand li he measures. He changes and becomes a bird whose name is Peng. The back of the Peng measures I don't know how many thousand li across. And when he rises up and flies off, his wings are like clouds all over the sky. When the sea begins to move, this bird sets off for the southern darkness, which is the lake of heaven. The universal harmony records various wonders, and it says, when the Peng journeys to the southern darkness, the waters are roiled for 3,000 li. He beats the whirlwind and rises 90,000 li, setting off on the 6th-month gale. Wavering heat, bits of dust, living things blowing each other about the sky. The sky looks very blue. Is that its real color? Or is it because it is so far away and has no end? When the bird looks down, all he sees is blue too. If the water is not piled up deep enough, it won't have the strength to bear up a big boat. Pour a cup of water into a hollow in the floor, and bits of trash will sail in it like boats. But set the cup there, and it will stick fast, for the water is too shallow and the boat too large. If wind is not piled up deep enough, it won't have the strength to bear up great wings. Therefore, when the Peng rises 90,000 li, he must have the wind under him like that. Only then can he mount on the back of the wind, shoulder the blue sky, and nothing can hinder or block him. Only then can he set his eyes to the south. The cicada and the little dove laugh at this, saying, when we make an effort and fly up, we can get as far as the elm or the sappanwood tree, but sometimes we don't make it and just fall down on the ground. Now, how is anyone going to do 90,000 li to the south? If you go off to the green woods nearby, you can take along food for 3 meals and come back with your stomach as full as ever. If you are going 100 li, you must grind your grain the night before. And if you're going 1,000 li, you must start getting the provisions together 3 months in advance. What do these two creatures understand? Little understanding cannot come up to great understanding. The short-lived cannot come up to the long-lived. Right, so this is how it begins, with this crazy tall tale. And there are one can brood in this tall tale for a long time. But I guess the things that I'll point out now, one feature of Zhuangzi that comes up a lot in his stories is the question of perspective. Right, you know, so the dove and the cicada looking up, you know, they can't grasp this, what's happening, and they laugh at it. And Zhuangzi will keep playing. In fact, if you see things from one side, it looks like this. If you see things from the other side, it looks like that. If you see things from yet another side, they look like that. So he's always got this other side to things that you can look at things from. And so this recurs in Zhuangzi. And it goes with the kind of freedom of mind that he has. So the problem with most human misery is that you get stuck, you get hung up on one way of looking at things. You can't see your way around to the other side. So Zhuangzi throughout will do a lot of shaking up in that. And second thing I'll point out is that what comes up very frequently in Zhuangzi is the idea of transformation. So when the fish turns into a bird, so it sounds like a fairy tale. So so it turns into a bird, and these transformations occur in Zhuangzi. I was looking up the Chinese for this, and it really is kind of like the word means something like creative transformation, and he sees this is what nature does. So from moment to moment, if you didn't already think you were trained to expect what was coming next, you really couldn't imagine what comes next. For example, from a caterpillar, when the caterpillar goes into a cocoon and then emerges as a butterfly, you can't really predict like that caterpillar turning into a butterfly. It happens, and it's wondrous every time. But at nature, his sense is that in nature there's a kind of surprise that is built in. One way I look at this story is that I ask myself, when does a fish turn into a bird? Right? And in daily terms, say, well, when the bird eats the fish. Right? And so then in ordinary terms, the bird is the subject that does something to the fish, the object. And we've decided in that case that the bird is the subject and the fish is the object of this eating verb. But what if you flip the perspective again, and what you find is that in the act of eating, the fish turns into the bird? What if it went that way? And it's decided to become part of bird. And so what it did to me when I realized that is that I realized that eating is actually very mysterious. Nobody really knows how it is that we can eat living being, and that living being then gets broken down and becomes part of us. So it literally becomes part of us. So I think that would be an example of an ordinary transformation, like a daily transformation that we have become dull to the wonder of, because it's so regular, right? So he's very, very interested in transformations. Now I'll stop there for questions.
In fact, let me just say that anyone is completely welcome to submit a question to the Q&A button on the bottom panel. So feel free to ask a question really at any time. But what I'm curious about is the relation, or is the play on size and proportionality between like the birdfish and the cicadas and the dove. What is going on there, and what is going on with these outlandish measurements?
Yeah, well, he's playing, right? He's thinking of like inconceivable differences in scale. Right? So you might say, what is it that you can imagine in the beings around you, right? So I'm sitting at the table right now, and it's wooden, and I'm looking at this table, and I'm saying, well, there's inside this, a fly just landed on it. I chased it away. So for me, it's a table to put my laptop on, to have this Zoom conference. For the fly, it's some kind of landing pad as it's looking for food. There's going to be another bug in there that's eating the table, so it is food for this other bug. Who knows what it is for my dogs who share the office with me. But there's a way in which all those the other realities are inconceivable to me. Right? So one might say that the world at my feet is unimaginable. The more I look into it, the more I find. But it shakes me up when I try to imagine it from the other side. Like, what do all these other beings think I'm doing? What do they think is going on? Right? And so I think his playing with scale is, he's joking, but it's to jolt us in a way. So what if there is a scale of looking at things from which everything we think we understand is nothing?
Mm. So it seems to be, he seems to be prodding us to a kind of, he wants us to avoid fixedness, it seems like. He wants us to avoid fixing ourselves, our vantage points, our perspectives on any one particular point, and be open to a kind of flux of different kind of perspectives, different kinds of, imagining different kinds of realities from different perspectives. Is that right?
Yeah.
Open flexibility, that seems to be the way of Daoism, I guess, right?
Yeah. Fluidity. Your mind can move. Yeah. You're not locked in. Yeah. And I think there's a sense that the truth, at least what's true, is available only to that kind of flexible, rapid mind. Zhuangzi is very rapid. He's really fast. You can tell by the amount of ground covered in that first passage.
So this is where you might get some contrast with, maybe this sounds too simplistic, but the contrast between maybe the Western kind of tendency to be more propositional. Is something true or not?
Yeah.
This is a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, in Chinese philosophy, there's nobody ever gives a definition
Of anything. Oh.
Definition is not a thing. I mean, it's a peculiarly Western obsession.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah. A lot of analogies.
Well, we have a question. Should I read this question?
Yes, please.
And this is from Katie Schertl. What do you make of his question, quote, is blue the sky's true color, or is it because of the vastness, unquote? How does vastness interfere with truth? So what do you think about that question?
I think, interesting question. I'm just trying to think what he would say. I mean, I don't think he would say that it's truth that's being interfered with, but it might be dogma. It might be settled opinions.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we in our Western mind, we might kind of equate truth with something that is settled, right? That's in place.
Yeah.
Or maybe Confucianism was like that. That Confucianism seemed to kind of set the kind of default viewpoint of Chinese society, perhaps, and then whereas Daoism comes along and tries to unseat that. Is that
there's something in that. I mean, early Confucianism is also very flexible, very nuanced. It doesn't give definitions either, and in fact, it's one feature of reading philosophy in non-Indo-European languages, that there are certain habits of mind that you are led to by speaking an Indo-European language. For example, when we can say that this thing is true, that thing is true, and from the adjective true, we're able to make a noun truth, right? And so then we're able to capitalize that. It says, what I love is the truth, with capitalized T. The Chinese don't do that, right? They can, like, words can take different parts of speech, but what we translate as true is for them would be something like is or is not the case. But they don't. But just because they can make a big abstract noun of it doesn't mean that they would do that, because they would not think that's helpful.
I see.
Yeah. So one might say for Taoists that they do care about what is the case, right? But that might be more complex and nuanced than anything that can be said in a proposition.
Maybe a story, the form of story.
Yeah, a story, an anecdote, or they say, or an analogy. Yeah. And I think it may be that, and the Confucians are like that too. So it may be that most kind of moral truths, are best understood and explored that way, rather than with propositions, to which there are always exceptions, awkward exceptions.
And it's interesting that you see that in like something like the New Testament that you referred to before.
Yeah.
More parables, more stories, accounts of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But do you want to go?
Yeah, let's go to number 2. Okay, another story. So number 2 is the most famous Zhuangzi story. Everyone knows this story, partly because I think it's used in The Matrix. But so once Zhuangzhou, that's the name of Zhuangzi, once Zhuangzhou dreamt he was a butterfly flitting and fluttering around, happy with himself and doing as he pleased. He didn't know he was Zhuangzhou. Suddenly he woke up and there he was, solid and unmistakable Zhuangzhou. But he didn't know if he was Zhuangzhou who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzhou. Between Zhuangzhou and a butterfly, there must be some distinction. This is called the transformation of things. So this word transformation comes up explicitly here. So this is another example of how there's another side to what we take to be real. And again, he's being very playful. So what we take to be real, the kind of ordered nature, the ordered world that we think we live in, is he's saying, what if that's the epiphenomena of something else that we're not aware of? Right. So this is his way of kind of communicating the wonder. So he picks on that moment when you had a very vivid dream and you wake up in the morning and you think, where am I? Who am I? Well, I was a butterfly. Whoa. Was I a butterfly? Am I a butterfly? Who am I now? When the dream seemed more real than the world you're waking into. And so Zhuangzi doesn't dismiss that. He's saying, well, okay, maybe there's something in it. Maybe there's some sense. What that expresses is some sense that what you take to be the world isn't it. It's more mysterious than you think it is. Right? And so the transformation of things, this is one version of the transformation of things, is there's another side. And it's to do with, this time it's to do with perspective, right? It's to do with which side are you looking at things from. To the butterfly, that world was real. Yeah.
So the transformation of things implies, at least in maybe the Western mind, it implies a kind of transaction between a point A and a point B. Whereas it seems like what he's talking about here, I'm not sure if the word transformation fits as much as just like mutability, that could go either way at any time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, mutability. I mean, things can change completely.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Last time I was at Books and Bridges, I brought up this Buddhist, this little Buddhist parable of what comes from milk. So when you I didn't go into it very deeply, but so you have milk, and then the milk turns to, I don't know what it turns to, curds, then it turns to whey, and then it turns to yogurt, and then it turns to butter, and then it turns to cheese, like that. So there's a sequence of things that milk turns to. And at any given point, say when you look at the difference between, say, butter and cheese, let's say, so you look at the difference between butter and cheese, it's not that you can find a substratum of milk underlying them. When you look closely, either it's butter or it's cheese. Well, so there's so when it's changed, there's every moment of the change of milk, it becomes something else, and it becomes something else, and obviously it's constituted by temperature conditions and bacteria and and stuff like that. But all those things, all the conditions, make up this thing that you're looking at hungrily, and then it and then when it changes, it's an absolute change. It's almost as if there's a gap between one thing and another. So I think it's that kind of thing that he means by transformation. It's both the perspectival transformation, that looked at from this side is this, looked at from that side it's that. Right? But it's also this other transformation of mutability, is that not only does the mind move, but nature itself moves.
Hmm. So is there an underlying nature under which all of this mutability happens?
Yeah, we'll come to that in the last one. That's a good question. Keep that one on hold.
Sure.
Yeah.
Want to go to number 3?
Let's go to number 3. This is another long one.
Okay.
It's a wonderful story. Master Se, Master Yu, Master Li, and Master Lai were all 4 talking together. So Zhuangzi often has this group of friends, right? Who can look upon non-being as his head, on life as his back, and on death as his rump, they said. Who knows that life and death, existence and annihilation are all a single body? I will be his friend. The 4 men looked at each other and smiled. There was no disagreement in their hearts, and so the 4 of them became friends. All at once, Master Yu fell ill. Master Se went to ask how he was. Amazing, said Master Yu. The Creator is making me all crookedy like this. My back sticks up like a hunchback, and my vital organs are on top of me. My chin is hidden in my navel, and my shoulders are up above my head, and my pigtail points at the sky. It must be some dislocation of the yin and yang. Yet he seemed calm at heart and unconcerned. Dragging himself haltingly to the well, he looked at his reflection and said, My, so the Creator is making me all crookedy like this. Do you resent it? Asked Master Se. Why no? Why would I resent it? If the process continues, perhaps in time he'll transform my left arm into a rooster. In that case, I'll keep watch on the night. Or perhaps in time he'll transform my right arm into a crossbow pellet, and I'll shoot down an owl for roasting. Or perhaps in time he'll transform my buttocks into cartwheels. Then with my spirit for a horse, I'll climb up and go for a ride. What need will I ever have for a carriage again? I received life because the time had come. I will lose it because the order of things passes on. Be content with this time and dwell in this order, and then neither sorrow nor joy can touch you. In ancient times, this was called the freeing of the bound. There are those who cannot free themselves because they are bound by things, but nothing can ever win against heaven. That's the way it's always been. What would I have to resent? Suddenly, Master Lai grew ill. Gasping and wheezing, he lay at the point of death. His wife and children gathered round in a circle and began to cry. Master Li, who had come to ask how he was, said, Shoo, get back, don't disturb the process of change. Then he leaned against a doorway and talked to Master Lai. How marvelous the Creator is. What is he going to make of you next? Where is he going to send you? Will he make you into a rat's liver? Will he make you into a bug's arm? Anyway, this one I actually find a very powerful story. And I remember the first time I read Zhuangzi, I'd read this, and the day after I had a talk with a student of mine, a former student of mine who had graduated from St. John's and was on the path to his medical career, but his first job was working in a morgue. And so he was a physician's assistant in a morgue. And he told me once that he had a revelation there. And he said that once he had to deal with victims of a car wreck, and a mother and 4 small kids were killed in this car wreck. And so he had to do an autopsy on the mother. And the mother was, about 400 pounds, big 400-pound lady. And he did, at first with some trepidation, he cut her open, and he was new to this, so he cut her open, and he was looking around, and he saw that she had a giant cancer in her, that it was gigantic. And at first he was appalled, but then he started looking at the cancer cells and found it was actually pretty miraculous, that the cancer cells were astonishing in their formations and how they grew, and he got very absorbed into this. And I think that little thing opened up this story for me, because it's not a little thing, actually it was a big thing, so that then what he opened up was that was the idea of transformations, that this story expressed, that everything that happens to us is transformation. A virus, a bacteria, a cancer, and a rash, and so when I get one of these things, I look at it and I say, well, hey, this is really interesting. What's it going to turn into next? Right? This is really interesting. And in fact, it is really interesting because people study these things for life. right? So it's really interesting. There's nothing uninteresting about it intrinsically. It's not something to be shunned intrinsically. So it changed my way of looking at things. But the idea is, I just go back to your question, Nathan. It seems the story implies there is an order to things, right? And when these early Chinese texts use the word nature, often the word nature can be translated. We use the word heaven. The word heaven can be translated as nature.
Is it a different kind of nature than earthly nature, though?
Something, yeah. So it can be, depending on which author you're reading. They can each one uses it very differently. And I think in Zhuangzi, most of the time, it's when he uses "from heaven," like this, he means nature. What's kind of inbuilt in things that can't be avoided, like death. Right. So there's an order to things.
So we have a question.
Okay.
Gonzalo Gamara Jordan.
Hi, Gonzalo. Yeah.
Says, hi, Krishnan. A pleasure to hear you. I have a question about chapter 2. What kind of distinction do you think Zhuangzi means? Is the butterfly the same as Zhuangzi, the human, or are they different? Is there something which is numerically identical in both cases that underlies the transformation? Or is there nothing common, or that nothing remains between these transformations? Yet is there a seamless identity that can run throughout?
Yeah. So in the Aristotelian way of thinking about change, which is also like the Indian way of thinking about change, the Hindu way. So if A changes into B, there's got to be something underlying A and B that enables the change from A to B, right? So there's a substratum. But I think, and Buddhism is very empirical about this, there's no substratum. You can't find a substratum. That if you look at butter and cheese, you're not going to find a substratum of milk in there. So if you look at so there's nothing, for that reason in Buddhism, it's often held that there's no soul in Buddhism. There's no unchanging thing underneath that, right? And so to this question, I think that Zhuangzi would say there's no substratum. It changes. It's a complete transformation.
Is that supposed to make us happy or not?
I think so. I think it's freeing, because if there were an unchanging thing underneath, it couldn't relate to anything else.
Say more.
Something is unchanging. If something is impervious to change, nothing can make an impact on it. So it can't have a meaningful relationship.
An unmoved mover.
An unmoved mover, exactly. Yeah. Things might be drawn to it, but it's not going to change with another being.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's actually something sad and kind of like trapped about something like an underlying being, a substratum being that can't be touched by anything it meets. It's alone.
Now you are speaking in more of a personal sense. Are you speaking in terms of someone's identity?
Yeah.
It could apply to that, I guess.
Yeah, identity could apply to soul. Yeah.
So if someone has a fixed identity, they're just less free. Zhuangzi would say that, right?
Yeah. Because they're trapped. They can't move out of that. Because if they moved out of that, it would be change.
I wonder, on the other hand, is there anything to say about the perpetual kind of motion of that makes someone less free because you're always just moving and spinning without a foundation? It could go both ways, I suppose.
Yeah, if it's moving and spinning without any sense of agency, right? I think that would be like that's something that's constantly being pushed around by something, right? That would be less free, right? But the question of freedom is always like difficult one, and Gonzalo knows that it's one of the hardest questions that philosophers can answer, and nobody agrees, right? So
Is Gonzalo St. John's alumni?
yeah,
Alumnus?
yeah, and a
Cool.
philosopher.
Great.
Yeah. Anyway, where were we?
Going to the next story, or?
Yeah, well, I just want to say this transformation thing, so in a way, I think these four old men, when they're talking to each other, I think what this story is like a playful, almost it's a playful, ludicrous way of kind of expressing a fearlessness about death and disease, right? So it's typical of Zhuangzi that he exaggerates it, so that it's like Monty Python. You can imagine the Monty Python crew kind of like enacting this thing, and it would be hilarious. But the message is very deep. That there's in a way he's saying there's nothing to be afraid of. There's always another side to things. And it could be that somebody is the kind of person who is trapped in one view is trapped because they're afraid of being challenged to be something else. But nature will make it so that they have no choice but to be something else. Right? Even if it's that's death eventually, that so nature is moving us along constantly, and you can't predict where it's going to go. You're going to die, but you have no idea how you're going to die.
And they seem to believe in, or at least imply, some kind of existence after his death.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What makes you up doesn't go fut, right? So all the stuff that makes you up continues, but it's not just material. You're made up. And the Buddhists also agree with that. You're made up with material stuff, but also the stuff of mind, the stuff of feeling. So these philosophies are not materialist, and the complex composition of a being, right, includes sensory and consciousness dimensions that also don't disappear. So they have to go somewhere. But this doesn't mean that you, the individual that you knew, will continue. Yeah. So transformation. So let's go on to 4.
Okay.
Okay. So now we're kind of like moving to another side of Zhuangzi, and it's related to the transformation side, because in a way the openness to transformation, the not resisting it mentally, right? Letting nature take you to places that you couldn't even imagine before, take you to see things that you wouldn't otherwise see if life hadn't made you look. So there's that non-resisting of life involves a kind of intellectual relaxation. So they say, well, relax, stop always forcing things into a mold or limited set of things. Nature is much bigger. Nature is like the fish that can transform into the giant bird, and that has vast scale that you can't even imagine. Nature's like that. Nature's unimaginable. So why are you in your little tiny world thinking things should be this or that way, right? And so this story speaks to that. So Huizi apparently was a logician, and there were a number of conversations between Zhuangzi and Huizi, and it's interesting that there were a number of conversations. So Zhuangzi obviously enjoyed philosophical argumentation and just philosophical jostling and poking with his friends, and so Huizi is an interlocutor. So Huizi said to Zhuangzi, "The king of Wei gave me some seeds of a huge gourd. I planted them, and when they grew up, the fruit was big enough to hold 5 pickles. I tried using it for a water container, but it was so heavy I couldn't lift it. I split it in half to make dippers, but they were so large and unwieldy that I couldn't dip them into anything. It's not that the gourds weren't fantastically big, but I decided they were no use, and so I smashed them to pieces." Zhuangzi said, "You certainly are dense when it comes to using big things. In Sung, there was a man who was skilled at making a salve to prevent chapped hands. And generation after generation, his family made a living by bleaching silk in water. A traveler heard about the salve and offered to buy the prescription for 100 measures of gold. The man called everyone to a family council. For generations, we've been bleaching silks and we've never made more than a few measures of gold, he said. Now, if we sell our secret, we can make 100 measures in one morning. Let's let him have it. The traveler got the salve and introduced it to the king of Wu, who was having trouble with the state of Yue. The king put the man in charge of his troops, and that winter they fought a naval battle with the men of Yue and gave them a bad beating. A portion of the conquered territory was awarded to the man as a fief. The salve had the power to prevent chapped hands in either case, but one man used it to get a fief, while the other one never got beyond silk bleaching, because they used it in different ways. Now, you had a gourd big enough to hold 5 pickles. Why didn't you think of making it into a great tub, so you could go floating around the rivers and lakes, instead of worrying because it was too big and unwieldy to dip into things? Obviously, you still have a lot of underbrush in your head. I'll read one more. Okay, so it's actually this one. Huizi said to Zhuangzi, so conversation continues. I have a big tree of the kind men call shu. Its trunk is too gnarled and bumpy to apply a measuring line to, its branches too bent and twisty to match up to a compass or square. You could stand it by the road, and no carpenter would look at it twice. Your words too are big and useless, and so everyone alike spurns them. So it gets abusive. Right? Zhuangzi said, maybe you've never seen a wildcat or a weasel. It crouches down and hides, watching for something to come along. It leaps and races east and west, not hesitating to go high or low until it falls into the trap and dies in the net. Then again, there's the yak, big as a cloud covering the sky. It certainly knows how to be big, though it doesn't know how to catch rats. Now, you have this big tree, and you're distressed because it's useless. Why don't you plant it in not even anything village, or the field of broad and boundless? Relax and do nothing by its side, or lie down for a free and easy sleep under it. Access will never shorten its life. Nothing can ever harm it. If there's no use for it, how can it come to grief or pain? And so this tree comes up in Zhuangzi another time, and it's a carpenter who comes along and he sees this gigantic tree that's all kind of gnarled and full of nuts, and it's gigantic, it's ancient. But the carpenter looks at it and says, I can't do anything with this tree. Right? And he walks on and he says, it's a useless tree. And he walks on, and that night the tree comes to him in a dream and says, why do you call me a useless tree? Look at it, I've lived 500 years, it's I'm a holy thing. But anyway, so this strand of Zhuangzi thought about the useless, and is really concerns narrow-mindedness, our usual narrow-mindedness about what things are and what they're good for, and that we get upset when things don't turn out the way we want them to be, or the way that we find useful. And both the salve story, actually all three, the salve story, the gourd story, and the tree story, I think are trying to playfully kind of inculcate a kind of flexibility of mind, where, say, with the salve, which is a story within a story, you have this generation of silk bleachers who are using this stuff for this one thing that's been pretty profitable to them, and never occurs to them to think of what else this might be good for. When it takes a stranger coming in and say, this is just what I'm using for, and he saves the kingdom with it. And so there's classic story, kind of narrow-mindedness, that the uses of a thing are not intrinsic to it. They are rather kind of part of how we view it. And so you switch perspective again, and all of a sudden the thing expands and becomes something else. That may be even more useful. In the case of the gourd and the tree, you find, well, it's really hard to think of a use for these things, right? But then Zhuangzi says, well, you can just relax in them. Just wonder at them, behold them. Why do you have to force things into furniture?
Yeah, when I was reading the introduction of this book, the translator was saying that one of the main animating ideas behind Zhuangzi is that we shouldn't that our natural inclination is to attach the value of something good or the value of good or bad onto something. And he's saying we shouldn't do that. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of what the Stoics believed as well, which is that it's not, something is not good or bad intrinsically, it's what we say that it is. So yeah, we have a power in our own mind to attach a value to something that limits that thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 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 And I think Zhuangzi said, well, there is something that it is, but it's not reducible to your view of things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know, so I wouldn't say that he doesn't think that there isn't a being, but the being is in a way more vast and more many-sided than you can imagine.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, this little set of parables I have found useful when I get frustrated with people, right? Especially certain teenagers that I know that, you know, spend all day lying around the house and doing nothing, you know. So then I use the you know, I jolt myself, give myself a little Zhuangzi push, and I think about the tree.
Mm.
And it's easy to do that with the tree for me. I find trees beautiful, and so no matter how gnarled and crooked a tree is, you know, I marvel at a tree, even though I can find no use for it. And a tree that grows awkwardly in a garden and whose roots are starting to destroy the house, like I can find that beautiful. So then I say, well, why can't I find this teenager beautiful? You know, for the same way, why can't? And so
they're storing up some imaginative something.
Yeah,
by
and
laying down and lounging.
yeah, you know, so it's like relax, like don't resist reality as it is, you know. So yeah, you had a thought.
No, it's just this idea of and we all do this, wanting to bend reality to our notions of how reality should be, instead of allowing it to move in its own direction.
Yeah, because it's more interesting the way it is.
Yeah.
Right, it's like that big bird flying over. It's more interesting than the cicada and the dove think it is. Like, you know, so from this other side, you can't even grasp it. Yeah, it's not only that you can't change it, but you can't even grasp it. You know, so yeah. So it's very, you know, so it's very humbling in his jokey way, you know, kind of the fantastic style, the wild imagination. You know, Zhuangzi has a great sense of humor, but he's kind of playing with you, and the play is a way to kind of free you from your locked ideas, right? But you know that this kind of play will also cut out people who want simple answers and have no patience with this kind of play.
Would you want to continue reading? Actually, we have a question.
Okay.
Amy Thurston asks, Hi, Krishnan. Yeah, Amy Thurston sounds very familiar to me. Hi, Krishnan and Nate. Going back to Nate's question about capital T truth, isn't Zhuangzi saying that nature is true, but that we can't see it because we are continually judging it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
And then, well, Daniel, I don't know if you want to say more on that, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's right. You know, I was going to say, you know, let's think about this, but I think in the story of the four old men, you know, there's you think there's an order to things. There's a principle in things, right? But we can't reduce it.
We may see it just a part of it, a portion.
Yeah, we see one side of it, but the sides that it has are infinite.
Let me ask the question, or pose this question from Daniel Boyer, who is also St. John's College.
Hi, Dan. Yeah.
Good guy. He asks, does this relaxation of our epistemic impulses bear any resemblance to Cartesian meditative abstraction in his armchair? I'm thinking about the wax.
Mm-hmm.
That's my interjection. Or what do you see as the distinction between the two? Our epistemic impulses. Yeah. Okay.
It says Liliana would like to answer this question live. Go ahead. Yeah. Free me.
I don't know if anyone can.
Well, I think the main difference is that Zhuangzi doesn't lead to math. Right, whereas Descartes thinks there is a kind of mathematical order to things.
So life is way too complex to be reduced.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But the wax, I think the wax is good. You know, you can't. Liliana really wants to answer this question live. Yeah.
She says she's unable to.
Okay.
Next time, perhaps she will.
Yeah. Anyway.
So Dan, if you're listening, Dan, you might be referring to comparing whether or not there's an underlying quality of the wax after it melts with the milk after it curds. Maybe Dan is asking that kind of a question as well, implying that.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you think about the wax as not the wax that is shaped into a figure and then melts into a puddle, but you think about the whole, say, beeswax. Let's say you think about like where the step before that, and the step before that, and the step before that. You know, where the bee got it from. You know, and then where it goes to when it burns out. Right. You know, so then when you think about the whole cycle, then I think it is more like the curds into whey. You know, because at each stage it's constituted by such different things. Right, but narrowly, you know, if you take that short stage of the wax as candle and the wax as kind of melted wax, then or Descartes' thing was a seal, wasn't it? You know, then it's easier to see in that short that smaller scale of things that is asked the question of what is it that is the substratum between all those manifestations of this thing? Is there a substratum?
I guess at a certain point it might become impossible to follow that common thread all the way across that chain of process.
Yeah. I mean, modern chemistry and physics might mathematize it. You know, it's an equation.
Well, do you want to read the last one of the last two? I'll let you decide.
Yeah, let's go to I can't remember what the next one was.
The goblet.
Let's go to
Swimming underwater is number 5.
Number 5 is the one, the underwater. Let's go to the next one. Cook Ding. Right, so this is like, I think, many people's favorite Zhuangzi story. Cook Ding was cutting up an ox for Lord Wenhui. At every touch of his hand, every heave of his shoulder, every move of his feet, every thrust of his knee, zip, zoop, he slithered the knife along with a zing, and all was in perfect rhythm, as though he were performing the dance of the mulberry grove or keeping time to the Jing show music. "Ah, this is marvelous," said Lord Wenhui. "Imagine skill reaching such heights." Cook Ding laid down his knife and replied, "What I care about is the way, which goes beyond skill." So the way here is the Dao. "When I first began cutting up oxen, all I could see was the ox itself. After 3 years, I no longer saw the whole ox. And now I go at it by spirit and don't look with my eyes. Perception and understanding have come to a stop, and spirit moves where it wants. I go along with a natural makeup, strike in the big hollows, guide the knife through the big openings, and follow things as they are. So I never touch the smallest ligament or tendon, much less a main joint. A good cook changes his knife once a year because he cuts. A mediocre cook changes his knife once a month because he hacks. I've had this knife of mine for 19 years, and I've cut up thousands of oxen with it, and yet the blade is as good as though it had just come from the grindstone. There are spaces between the joints, and the blade of the knife has really no thickness. If you insert what has no thickness into such spaces, then there's plenty of room, more than enough for the blade to play about in. That's why after 19 years, the blade of my knife is still as good as when it first came from the grindstone. However, when I come to a complicated place, I size up the difficulties, tell myself to watch out and be careful, keep my eyes on what I'm doing, work very slowly, and move the knife with the greatest subtlety until flop, the whole thing comes apart like a clod of earth crumbling to the ground. I stand there holding the knife and look all around me, completely satisfied and reluctant to move on. And then I wipe off the knife and put it away. And there's a last line here that I forgot to put on the film. So Lord, was it Prince? Who's the prince? The Lord looking on says, I have just learned from this how to care for life. And so this story is, I think it's so rich. Again, this is one of those stories that has so many sides to it. But one of the things that that I like to think about, I mean, firstly, to answer your question, is that there seems to be an order to nature. Seems to be some kind of structure. You know, the ox has a structure. There are hollow spaces to follow, and the good butcher follows nature, right? Doesn't fight with it. So here's my, so there's something there. It's not just whatever you think it is. But then what Cook Ding describes is that he spends many years learning how to do this until he comes to the point when he can just follow the structure without apparently seeing it. Right? So then I thought, okay, what does he can say? He can follow it with the spirit. He sees the ox with the spirit. And so then I thought, okay, what does that mean? So I have two little analogies. One is an analogy or instance. I'm not sure which one it is, but one is the extremely skilled woodworker who, I am a terrible woodworker, right? So whatever I do, I hack at it. But when I've been with master craftsmen and they've shown me, well, just follow the grain here. Right, and their blade just cuts down this grain, you know, effortlessly, and I can't even see what they're talking about. Right, I'm looking at the same thing that they are. I can't see what they're talking about, and if I had the hold of the saw, I couldn't feel it either. But somehow there's something that they know is there, that they're following, that is very subtle, and that opens up to them. Right, and then the other analogy is of a master sportsman, right? Say someone like I always like to choose like a basketball player who, you know, so I don't follow basketball, so I have no idea what I'm saying really. But someone like Magic Johnson, you know, when they're in the game, they're aware of what's going on in every inch of the court. They're not aware consciously. They just know where everyone is, where they're moving. And when, you know, and when they're on a good day, it's like magic how they managed to get that ball in. You know, how did he know to turn then? How did he know to make that move? And so it's really like magic, you know, so there's no way that he can teach you how to do that. But from the athlete's point of view, and I've had like one or two moments of this in fencing, where what happens in those moments is that you're hyper aware, but you also lose all track of time. Right, the moment seems to be timeless. It seems to slow down, and then the ball, or in my case, the blade, just moves by itself to where it wants to go, and I'm just following it. You know, so I think that's what Cook Ding is trying to express. So when things work well, when we are, you know, at our most when we are at our best, we're not struggling with what we're doing. Rather, we're, the phrase is in the flow, right? So we're in it and we're moving with it, right? And the characteristic of this is that we lose track of time, and we don't see with our eyes. We see with something else, which Zhuangzi says is the spirit. Partly, and I say this because partly the person who's watching on this feat, sees the same thing. But I'm not grasping in the moment what they're grasping.
So it seems to me like there's this kind of immeasurable interplay between experience and practice, instinct, memory. But then there's this additional quality of this mysterious quality of some kind of like all of these things cooperating at once. And there seems to be some other element that's allowing it to happen. But yeah, that's a, when someone, it's also called to be in the zone. Michael Jordan would talk about that when he's
in the zone. Yeah. I think that's what the Zhuangzi is about. So it's in the zone. The zone then it's not just a mental state, but it's also I think a position of practical efficacy, right? So when we're most efficacious.
Yeah.
In the real world, as it were, is when we're in the zone. And so there's some, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's bound by a structure, but yet it's free flowing. It's kind of a paradox in a way.
Yeah. And it's free flowing like in the structure. But then with a story like this, it suggests, well, we're capable of being in the zone. I mean, that's what's so striking about it. We have it in us to be in the zone. But then when the Lord says, "What skill is this?" Zhuangzi says, "Well, what I'm interested in is not skill, but the way." Right? Zhuangzi, I think, is addressing a conclusion that many people would jump to, is that this person is only doing these things because of the habits acquired by constant practice. Right? So it's not. And he's saying it's not that. It's not the same as that. As you can think of like many athletes or even musicians who practice and practice and practice and practice. And when the time comes for their performance, they never pull out that astonishing thing, right? Whereas the thing about great athletes and great musicians is that they regularly pull out this astonishing thing that they never practiced.
Yeah, sometimes they call it second nature.
Yeah, a kind of second nature. Yeah.
We have a question, I believe, on the chat button. No, never mind.
No. Sorry, Liliana. We're trying to figure out how to do this Zoom thing.
He's a great moderator.
Yeah. It's not intentional.
Do we have any more questions from anyone? Our time is probably up. Well, we do have a question, just popped up. Hey. This is from the great Billy Swadley. He asks this: "Thank you for sharing your insights. When do you expect your work on Tolkien will be published?"
Oh, thank you for asking. It's going to be published in August next year. Yeah, and it's a book about Lord of the Rings, and it's a series of it's a book of essays on Lord of the Rings, and what I'm trying to address in Lord of the Rings is the emotional complexity of the book, and why. And I make the argument it's not a book for children, but it's a book that grows richer and richer the older you get. And there's a reason that both Bilbo and Frodo were over 50 when they started out. And so I make the case that the book has an emotional complexity that speaks to later in life. That's what the book is about. So it'll be out next year.
Wow, that sounds great. I do remember reading some of your drafting up of your ideas through your blog posts several years ago about this.
Yeah.
Well, this is an example, ladies and gentlemen, of a St. John's College professor, or what they call tutors. They are extraordinarily intellectually versatile. They can jump from ancient Chinese texts to Middle Earth. That's quite a feat.
So we're tutors because we toot, but we don't toot our own horns. We're good at tooting the horns of books.
That's the first time I've heard that. That's good. One more question. Daniel Boyer is back asking this question. He says, "This is so awesome. Thanks for speaking, Krishnan, and thanks for hosting, Nathan. So, if being in the zone reserved, maybe he's saying, so is being in the zone reserved only for the geniuses of the world? Or can wannabes like me find that place of ecstasy? So great to see and hear you, Krishnan. Brings back great and horrific memories of the workouts." Kettlebell workouts?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's why it's a great question, because I think that's why Zhuangzi says, why Cook Ding says, it's not about skill, it's about the way. Mm-hmm. Right, which holds out a kind of hope that by an adjusting or a shock of perspective, that this is available to every one of us. You know, the Tao, this being the capacity to be in the zone is already in us. I think that's the point of the story. It's not about skill.
Yeah, we can all be a crafts person in our own way. We don't have to be a genius. You know, we often jump to the athletic comparison example. But in a way, we can all be professionals and geniuses at our own craft that we choose. So,
yeah.
Right?
No, I think so. I think so, and I think the keys in the first stories that I read, in a way, you know, there's reality. Don't resist it. You know, kind of be open to what it's trying to show you, and like that, you kind of like you can slip through it. And I think that's the Zhuangzi. It takes like decades not to resist it, to work through all your resistances to the actual ox and to see it.
Seeing through.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Our time is coming to a close. There's one more question.
Oh,
Katie
hi,
is
Katie.
asking a question. Do you think he is playing with words to expose their dual nature? The word useful, for example, is presented both as negative and positive. It seems like he is using words against themselves to expose something more true about what they signify. Cook Ding doesn't see an ox, he knows it more intimately.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. I think he's aware that there's a use to the word usefulness, or the use to the idea of use, but he's also seeing very clearly that usefulness can't be an end in itself. But usefulness always serves something else, you know, so Zhuangzi has an eye on that. But it could be that he's also that's not interested in use, you know, that part of that relaxation and the perspectival change is to shake yourself out of these narrow confines, you know, that things have this slot or that slot, this function or that function. And he says, no, they're kind of way more than that.
You know,
That's a great question.
In some ways, I think that he is demonstrating his very philosophy through the type of writing that he does. And I think that he would also say that flexibility in language is necessary as well to demonstrate this. And it seems like the way he writes is very much fluid and you know, open to different kinds of interpretation. Does not lend itself to like one rigid, you know, moral at the end of the story necessarily.
Yeah, and you can never tell what he's going to say next. And he always parodies himself as well. So it never becomes ossified into something. You know, you can't write a simple paragraph about, you know, Zhuangzi believes this.
Interesting. We have one question. Raquel Goldman.
Hi, Raquel.
Hello, Mr. Venkatesh. Thanks for this talk. There is a contrast presented in Zhuangzi between Confucians and Daoists. But as you pointed out, someone can be both, and there is no conflict for them. It's clear these two positions can be at odds, but are there ways in which they can complement each other? Perhaps you have a reading recommendation in mind. Good question.
I always have reading recommendations. I'm excellent at burying people under books, but I think, I mean, this question is a good one. Raquel, by the way, wrote her senior essay at St. John's on Zhuangzi, yeah, so she's a veteran reader of Zhuangzi. Yeah, I do think there's some kind of way in which they relate to each other. I mean, one might say developmental. If you're introduced to Zhuangzi when you're developmentally not ready for it, it might turn you into a callous swine who doesn't care about other people, right? Who just wants to play and frolic, you know. But if you've been a good Confucian, then you know, and you discover Zhuangzi at 30, like if you fulfill your responsibilities, if you're just a good person, if you've just become a good person, then reading Zhuangzi might make you more humble and open you up. But if you're a 14-year-old know-it-all and you read Zhuangzi, then it's just going to make you, you know, contemptuous of all the moralities around you.